it not be said that I'm a bad sport and can't bear to lose an argument? So I'm very happy to direct you to Chris Howard's stream. You can find that in the description, and you should be able to. Well, really you should listen to it from beginning to end so you can track how the subject was being discussed. I didn't join until the, let's see, which minute was this? The 44th minute. So the discussion had gotten going. And it began with AI. And then the subject went on to solutions and who we can trust with the management of AI. And I talked about the power behind the throne that is unaccountable because we don't have a transparent hierarchy. The people who are supposed to be in charge are not really in charge. And then there was a discussion about Christian apathy and resignation, and I was saying that the problem is attitudinal, and then I talked about invocations. I didn't actually mention prayers, but going back on it, I guess that was what I must have meant. I talked about hopeless, apathetic people invoking the deity that they claim to believe in. And then I was going to quote the book of Matthew, and I think that was what drove Tunji crazy. It was kind of him saying, you know, "Don't you dare quote our precious Bible, with your filthy mouth," and that kind of thing. So that was interesting to know. But basically, if if it's universal, then everyone has a right to quote it, don't they? So anyway, it's chapter 7 of Matthew, and it's the one that says, "Ask, seek, knock. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives. He who seeks finds, and to him who knocks, the door will be opened." And please go over Tunji's reactions. He basically shouted over me because he couldn't bear me quoting of the book of Matthew. But if I hadn't been so rudely interrupted, I would have said, this is basically a verse about prayer and invocations. Ordinary folk who are not even talking about God say things like, "What you don't ask for, you don't get. So ask for it," right? That's the logical conclusion that we get from the whole idea. So Tunji is so apathetic and resigned to failure that he won't even ask. So what is the point? What is the point of saying you believe in God and the afterlife if you're so apathetic and so resigned to failure that you refuse to even ask for the thing that you want? In my opinion, prayers are obviously you're asking for something, and you try not to ask for big things. And oh yes, there was another something else that annoyed me about what he thought I was saying. I'm an I'm not agnostic, so I wouldn't be asking for miracles, right? I would not be asking for miracles. So he was implying that I was asking God to change, to interfere with the free will of humanity to even change things. Of course not. I am agnostic. I'm not asking for miracles. All I'm proposing is that um, enough people, and it seems that there are quite a lot of people complaining about their government, will be asking the right questions, right? That's all I'm saying. And if enough people will ask each other and allow these questions to be answered without interruption and politely listen and not make judgments until you could actually make a point of not inserting your own answers, however annoying that person is. Well, you could help them by, asking questions of their difficulties, but really, if you ask a question, you should be prepared to listen to it politely and maybe, have the patience to wait until people ask, well, what do you think? What do you think is the problem? What do you think is the solution? But, if they're waffling, then you can, well, exercise your social skills. But, but listen to this verse. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives. He who seeks finds, and to him who knocks the door will be opened. Isn't this basically um, an encouragement for people to pray to God? Oh, that's how I interpret it. If you have any better ideas, no doubt you will let me know. So, for some reason, Tanji was actually very angry for. Oh, I don't quite know. I mean, was I saying anything wrong or incorrect? And I do hope you will go back on that stream and find out what exactly is this problem. There have been a few people who say, oh, but I'm wrong. And I say, okay, just say what it is that I said that you think is so wrong. And I'm not getting an answer. I can understand. And I'm not one of those, easily hurt people who can't take criticism. But I have to say that in the chat, in the Chris Howard stream, well, there was Chad who was saying I'm dishonest, so I think it's a bit cowardly of him to make accusations about me that I can't even read. I mean, I was only able to read them because in StreamYard you read all the comments that come through because you're reading what the host is reading. But obviously, in the YouTube window, I I can't read what Chad is saying because he's blocked me and he's accused me of dishonesty. But honestly, you need to be able to say you need to give further and better particulars of your claim. So if you're saying somebody murdered somebody, then you need to say who it was who was murdered. If you're accusing, somebody of theft, you have to say what property was stolen. And if you're accusing somebody of being a liar, then you need to say what the lie was. And if you're accusing somebody of being illogical, you need to you need to quote the argument that you consider to be illogical. it really is as simple as that. I just don't see what the problem is. Um, and with these Christians who are basically saying they don't want to do anything, and it's very puzzling because Tunji seems to be very, uh, very Christian, and obviously he was so triggered by me quoting Matthew that he immediately tried to shut me up. So um, that's interesting to see what he was saying. I wouldn't even talk to you, but I try not to engage, and everything you say is wrong. I don't even know where to begin to say where, how you're wrong. And then he proceeded to strawman me by pretending that I was praying for a miracle. And all I was saying, was a prelude to quoting Matthew and pointing to the therapeutic qualities of prayer. Because I think what happens is, you form a desire and you want to see it fulfilled. So you say what it is you want. But on the other hand, you're not really entitled to a miracle, are you? You might be entitled to something that could happen, that had a probability of happening, to happen, and that would be your lot, because miracles do not tend to happen. And it has been said that the Prophet Muhammad did not perform a single miracle, even though he was a successful military and political leader. So we have to attribute that to his leadership qualities. But Jesus, who performed magic tricks, ended up being executed. But he was also worshipped. But I don't know how sincerely he is being worshipped. Skyworks pops up to say, I'm disingenuous. I don't mind. You tell me how I'm being disingenuous then. Why can't you even do that? There's all these vague accusations. You're a murderer, you're a thief, you're a liar. And I say, okay, if you're saying I've murdered someone, but you're stolen something or told a lie, come at me and give further and better particulars of claim, but you can't do it. How am I a person of bad character? Have I been telling lies? I think I have been guilty of no more than saying things that you hate because you're an Islamophobe, right, Skyworks? That's your problem. That's your only problem. And of course, the last thing you're going to do is admit that you've been wrong. Let's go through the list of things that Tunji said about me that I found so irritating. Well, I think basically that's it. He accused me of praying for a miracle, for God's sakes. And I'm saying, all you have to do is start a national conversation or an international conversation about the nature and purpose of religion. What's so hard about that? I don't think it's hard at all. The moment you find somebody complaining about their government, you could say, well, maybe there's something wrong with our ruling classes. Why are they so corrupt and incompetent? Why? Is it our political system? Is it our moral system? Is our moral system Christianity or something else? Is there something wrong with our moral system? Should we have a better one? All these things you could be asking, but Tanji doesn't want to talk about any of that. Because I suppose he doesn't want Christianity to be called into question. And so I guess that's a hill he wants to die on. And the curious thing he said, having gone through that conversation after the stream was completed, was that he was saying he was going to leave it to the next generation to sort out. And he's not even married. And in fact, if you go to the beginning of the stream, he was complaining about not finding it difficult to find somebody to marry. So I think here is another manifestation of Western male neurosis. That he acknowledges there is a problem. It doesn't look like he plans on getting married, but he expects the next generation to solve the problem. But if he were planning to get married, if he did have offspring, he might not be expecting the next generation to sort it out. Simply because they probably wouldn't appreciate being left with a mess by their parents who refuse to even address a question without, getting mean and nasty and avoidant and, and incoherent. Because fundamentally, his criticisms about me are incoherent. And I noticed too that Chris was saying this is the Christian view. I mean, I don't see why Christians are in some way fundamentally incapable of identifying the problem. Are they really? Well, it just seems a terrible thing to condemn yourself to, of being unable to solve the problem because they're unable to identify the problem and unable to theorize about the possible solution once the problem has been identified. It's a very disturbing disability, I would say. No, I didn't. I wasn't claiming that I had murdered anyone or stolen anything. But really, if you're going to say you're going to accuse somebody of murder or theft, you have to say who the person was supposed to have murdered and who the person, what property the person was supposed to have stolen. And if you're accusing that person of being a liar, then you have to specify the lie that you're accusing that person of having told. Do you not really understand this? Be a better person. Right. Well, in what way? In what way could I be a better person? I lay it on the line. What else can I do but lay it on the line? Hopefully, if people find the full measure of what I'm saying too much, they can, maybe absorb it in degrees and pass it on to others. But time is short. So, Skyworks cannot say in what way I should be a better person. He cannot say how I have been dishonest. But he wants to agree with all my enemies, obviously, because he doesn't want to solve the problem. But I have discovered today that he has a daughter. So, what does it mean? What does it mean? You have a daughter, but you don't care about the future. Maybe you expect her to solve the problem. You hope to clear up the mess that you left behind and won't even talk about. Which is, frankly, dishonorable, isn't it? Right, so you assume I hate the West. Well, if I did hate the West, I wouldn't be living in it, and I certainly wouldn't be telling Westerners things about their history and their religion. It's just, too bad that you can't take any criticism. Because you worship your past, you worship your history. It cannot be challenged. Sounds like narcissism to me. I do not accept that I hate anyone. It's you who hate me. It's you who hate truth and logic. And so you have to accuse me of something. So to give yourself an excuse to ignore what I say. And even though you have no evidence, you will hope some mud sticks. So the best you can do is, because you hate us, you say these things that hurt our feelings, and therefore we can ignore you. I've been through it all before. Stockholm syndrome is what Westerners are enthralled to. I will actually give you the although you can find it in the description anyway. So I guess you have to lie to yourselves. You actually have to lie to yourselves to make your attitude seem halfway sane. Or you have to pretend that you don't know what I'm talking about. But that's all I wanted to say. It doesn't help if you can't make your charger stick. You have to say, I'm mad, I hate you, I'm talking nonsense. But you have to say how. How am I talking? Just get on with the job of, explaining it all to yourselves. Well, thank you. Thank you, Megan, for showing up. Thank you for saying that you can't keep kicking the can down the road. I go on the way I do because it's easy. It's easy if somebody can ask the obvious questions. And I've given you enough of a clue. And it's just, what is the nature and purpose of religion? How do you know when your religion is working? And how do you know when your religion is not working? How do you know when your government doesn't care about you? How do you know when the men are neurotic? Women are allowed to be neurotic. It's, of course, we're all overwhelmed by our emotions, but maybe you think men might be, you know, more solutions orientated. So, and this has some bearing on gender roles, and gender roles will have bearing on the institution of marriage, because nobody cares about gender roles if people can have sex and children without a marriage license, because if you want lots of sex partners, you just have to be good at having sex, right? But if you want a marriage partner and your prospective spouse takes the whole thing seriously, then he or she will want you to know if you're going to be a good parent and a good spouse, and will have long-term interests that go beyond a role in the hay. So that's all I'm saying. Women, if they're choosing a good night of sex, will not be choosing the man she has sex with for reliability and job prospects and all that sort of thing. Maybe women, it is up to women. Women just have to agree with each other. Should we? No, no, we shouldn't put out anymore. We're going to say, well, we're not going to put out until we get the ring on our finger. And I guess the men might say, well, you're not worth marrying and until and unless no fault no fault divorce is abolished. And then the women can say, okay, and then the problem is sorted. That is how I envisage success. So I don't think it's all that hard, is it? You get the men and the women who want to marry and have children, legitimate children, to the negotiating table, and this is how you work it out. The nature of religion is to organize the masses, to keep them marrying and trying to be good parents of legitimate children. That's what the purpose of religion is. And superstition, you see, it's probably too nuanced for all of you. Now, superstition is, believing in witches and crystal balls and zodiac signs and that kind of thing. And religion, organized religion, is attributing good and evil to the supreme and eternal Abrahamic God who created the universe and is omnipotent, omniscient, and perfectly moral. And if you think this way, you will have to think that all suffering, well, not all, suffering is punishment for sin. And if you haven't sinned, as Job had not sinned, then you are being tested to see if you deserve more than you already have. So that's a simple narrative. And it astonishes me that Tunji doesn't get it. And he's such a devout Christian too, but his depression and his inability to understand simple motivations that religion is supposed to make its adherents do is astonishing, really. And this seems to confirm why I think Christianity is no longer fit for its purpose. And also we mustn't forget that the purpose of Christianity was to defend the divine right of kings. It's not to, protect the rights of the subjects of absolute monarchs. It is just about getting the church to defend the divine right of kings. So, it's not there to instill an attitude of questioning in the subject, because the subject will probably get burnt at the stake, right? It's only when you have a book of rules that you might create an environment where people will think, oh well, if there is a book of rules, I would like to know what the rules are, and I will learn how to read, and then I will read this book of rules, and I will seek professional advice on how best to understand this book of rules so that I can arrange my life in a way that will benefit me. That is how you're meant to think. But as for Christianity, no. I think what's supposed to happen is that the monarch and his mates, the aristocracy, have control over the interpretation, and the people below, the subjects, have to suck it up or get burnt at the stake. And this was how Europe operated. Unless you're smart enough to get round the rules, and you won't be smart enough if you're some peasant, some feudal serf, some poor man who can't afford to send his children to the right schools. And things changed when Europeans crossed the Atlantic. But now, the entire system has been corrupted by I guess, the swinging 60s, the sex revolution, the widening and deepening of the matriarchy, also known as intersectional feminism or intersectionality. And we see now how much it has affected the men. So we can understand how the older generation do not want to rock the boat because they do not want their wife to be unhappy and or divorce them. But Tunji's attitude is really quite interesting in that you would expect, a bachelor to want to fight to do the right thing or just say the right thing, but all he does is be gloomy and doomy and apathetic and forbidding. That is the impression I get. It's not that he has never proposed a solution or never wanted to discuss a solution. He just wants to say things are getting worse. Nothing can be done. Oh dear, should I stay in the West or should I go? And that's all I have ever noticed him saying. And obviously his hatred of anyone with a solution is obvious. And he obviously hated me quoting from chapter 7 of Matthew. It's only Christianity that works to keep the masses in a state of ignorance. This guy works, has a daughter, I discovered earlier. So maybe he would care enough about her to try and, admit some of the mistakes of his generation, or perhaps he'll just keep quiet and hope she doesn't notice. But I think that's all I have to say on the subject. Let me just check if I have completed my list. Yeah, I've already said that. Kanji expects the next generation to sort it out. There is no desire by anyone to merge law with morality or even discuss morality. Fancy that. All these educated people who've taken out student loans to become graduates, they can't even discuss. They can't even discuss what morality is. Not even the Christians. Not even the Christians can do it. So it's very sad, and obviously you haven't got value for money in your corrupt system. And now I guess you won't even admit that the problem is going to get worse and that maybe going to university is not a sign of intelligence, but the other thing. I mean, I do hear quite intelligent people who must be graduates talking about working as a kitchen porter and stuff like that. And I think the problem is just not crystallizing the loss and admitting that there is something very wrong, and worse, there is something even more disturbing and sinister when men who are supposed to solve problems deny it, when we know that denial is a feminine vice.